My name is Dr. Nikia Lauter, and I'm a burn specialist or a burn surgeon. I work in a hospital that admits about 400 burn patients every year, and about the same number of patients we treat in the burn clinic as an outpatient. And the majority of those patients are children, and the majority are children under 5 years old. During my early years as a surgeon in training, I had to manage burn patients. And they were right in the back of the ward, neglected, seen last in the day, and really just avoided. And it was the suffering of those children, and I remember the children in that particular ward very, very clearly, was intense. And nobody could help me or gave me the tools to care for those patients appropriately. And that made a massive impact on me, and it's that has driven me, or I suppose ignited the burning in my heart to change burn care in the country and alleviate the suffering. It's a strange thing because I have no children of my own, and I never will. And it's these burn babies that have become my children. And you develop a love and a relationship for them when you treat them. And when one of them dies, it's hard. And my drive is to stop those babies dying.
Now, globally, burns are a serious public health problem. Now, according to the World Health Organization, more than 300,000 people die from fire-related burn injuries annually, with more deaths from scalds, electrical burns, and other forms of burns. In addition to those who die, millions more are left with lifelong disabilities, disfigurements, often resulting in stigma and rejection. Now, along with adults, children are particularly vulnerable to burns. In South Africa, burns are the third most common cause of accidental deaths among children under the age of 14 years. The suffering caused by burns is even more tragic, as burns are so eminently preventable. Now, May is Burns Awareness Month, so today we focus our discussion on burns. Our guest panel today includes the head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, the communications officer from ER24, founder of Children of Fire, and a burn survivor from the same organization, Children of Fire. We invite you to be part of this show by sharing, your views or perhaps asking some questions. And the number to call is Johannesburg 714-6918 or 6919. You can also tweet us at SABC Health Talk, or simply just interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. So sit back, relax, and learn from this exciting show coming to you just after a short break. I'm Dr. Selom Taung, and this is Health Talk.
Rights and Recourse tackles constitutional issues.
When South Africa became a constitutional democracy, we had a fairly sound legal system in place requiring the Constitution to guide the direction in which it must go and the way in which it must be refashioned.
The Justice Ministry, the custodian of human rights.
We actually have a plan to come up with a comprehensive review of our human rights instruments.
Advocates dealing with evidence.
Sometimes you have to use a crook to catch a crook. So we expected that their credibility would really be taken to task. You try and consult your witnesses and prepare them as best as you can.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
Phones, cloud systems and robots have taken over a lot of what used to be done manually.
Our accounting system is actually based on the cloud.
Google nowadays can tell you where you parked your car.
And Africa's entrepreneurs are using technology to create.
With Pocket Masipala, you can basically do all the services that you would do at the municipality physically by going there, but you can now do them on a mobile app.
Join me, Spumelele Zondi, on Sundays at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
established 20 years ago, the Johnson & Johnson Burns Treatment Center at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital is a state-of-the-art unit providing timely and specialized care to adult and pediatric burns patients.
This is a dedicated burn unit, and the way we're working here, we work in a multidisciplinary approach, which means that it's not one-man show. You've got other discipline.
From the physiotherapy department, we work very much with trying to get the patients as mobile as possible, getting them up and moving. We work in the ICU, where we're working primarily for their chests. So a lot of the patients that have inhalation burns, things like that, the patients who are ventilated, we treat their chests to try and keep their chests clear while they're in hospital. And then as soon as they can mobilize, we're getting them up and walking. We're addressing any problems which they may have with any joints in their bodies, trying to get them fit and functional as much as we can.
Here in adult burns, one of the primary roles of the speech therapist is to assess and manage people who have had facial burns or inhalation burns that have affected their ability to move their face, to feed themselves, to swallow safely, as well as to produce voice and to communicate their basic wants and needs.
Professor Adeline Muganza says the unit is under pressure as it receives patients not only from Gauteng but neighboring provinces at times.
It's a very busy unit, especially now that we're starting winter. It's a difficult time. We're expecting so many patients. Already we are full now in the adult side and pediatric as well.
But Muganza is satisfied with the treatment results.
Every day, every year, we improve in terms of mortality, and this is due to new development in burn management, new dressing, new technology, and this unit does a lot in terms of getting new knowledge on burns. So traveling overseas to other specialized centers to share our experience.
There are complications, but the unit works hard to minimize them.
The complications of burns can actually affect almost all the different systems. We're not talking about kidney failure, we're talking about cardiac failure sometimes, but infection is the most common causes of mortality, and it's one of the major complications. We always say that the treatment of burns starts on the scene, so that way you prevent and you actually decrease the chance of major complications.
Yeah, and prevention is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But before we start talking about burns, let me welcome our two special guests in studio. First up is Professor Adeline Muganza. Prof. Muganza is the head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital. Welcome to Health Talk, Prof.
Thank you.
All right. And of course, next to Prof is Russell. Russell Mering is the communications officer from ER24. Welcome to Health Talk, Russell.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's start with you, Prof. And let's start from the basics. We're talking burns. I would imagine people would have an idea of what burns are, but formally, what are burns?
Yes. What we usually say, burns is a disease of the skin.
Right.
Which means that the skin is injured. And as you know, the skin is one of the most important organs, for someone, because the skin provides the defense against infection. The skin make sure that you keep water in the body, and the skin plays other roles, like you get vitamin D for growth.
Yeah.
Okay. So without the skin, you cannot live.
Right. So I would imagine that talks to the complications from burns, to say what happens when you burned. But I believe that there's various degrees of burns. We often hear about first-degree burns, second-degree burns, and that sort of thing. Can you just take us through what those are?
Yes, absolutely. Now, what you have to do, just imagine the skin as a house. Now, if the roof of the house is burned, then you call it a first degree. Now, if the ceiling is burned as well, you call it a second degree. Now, if the house is burned completely, it means the roof, the ceiling, even the floor, that third degree, it means you're dealing with severe burns.
Okay.
That's how we classified in a simple way.
All right. I want to come back to you and ask you just how common it is that we see burns from your perspective. But first, let me ask Russell. Russell, you out there, and you often confronted with emergencies out there, and you see burns as one of those emergencies that you encounter. Just give us a sense of how common you see burns and who the victims normally are.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, especially that we are coming into winter now, people are using all sorts of heat to keep warm, whether it is campfires, stoves, various types of heaters, and especially during winter, it is very, very common. And the most common sort of people that will sustain these injuries are children. What we do see is the injuries from touching hot stoves, for example. Hot water, we see it quite often where children will reach for the kettle, they will reach for a pot of water that is boiling on the stove, and they can't really reach it, so they're trying to grab it and pull it down.
Okay, we're going to come back to some of those causes and risk factors for burns in a moment, but you do see quite a lot of children and adults, I'll
Absolutely.
All right, let's come back to you, Prof. By the way, you're the past president of the South African Burns Society. Just give us a sense of what the society is and what you do.
Oh, yes. The South African Burn Society is a very important association. So you have doctors, nurses, and other disciplines like OT, physiotherapists, and so on. So we make sure that we do everything to prevent burns, and we share our experience in terms of treatment, and we do as well research as a burns unit, as a burns society. So it's very important to be organized and to have a common fight.
All right. Yes. Russell now just mentioned, obviously he does encounter burns, and most people being children and that sort of thing. From your perspective, how common are burns in South Africa, and who is most affected?
Yes, it is said in general that plus or minus 4% of South Africans somehow get burned every year. But it depends. Some have minor burns, other major burns. But out of those patients, more than 50% are children. And almost 70% of those children are those with less than 4 years. So you understand that it's very important to prevent, and especially those children, they get burns due to hot water and other hot liquids. Yeah. Of course, we do see as well burns in children due to chemical products or electrical burns sometimes.
All right. So I want to ask you about the normal clinical course for burns and what you do for burns. But just going back to that issue of the classification, we often hear first degree, second degree.
Yes.
But in some instances, you'd hear 5% or 10%. Just clarify this as to us. I mean, is it something that remains within the domains of the medical professionals, or is it something that the public should know about?
No, the public should know about it, because when we talk about first degree, second degree, it's the depth of skin involvement, how much it is burned. Now, you need to look at the size of burns as well. So if you look at a man, it's 100%, and then part of the body is burned, you call it a 30%, 40%. And we use a rule of 9, which means you know that the leg is 9%, the arm is 9%. But if you don't know how to count it, the easier way is to look at the patient hand, and the hand represent 1%. So if you've got burns here, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4%. Easy way to do.
I see.
Yes.
So, but what does it mean? What's the implication?
Very important implication, because every time someone phone me that has got burn, those are the questions that I'm going to ask. What is the degree of burns? What is the percentage of burns? Because the larger the burns, then the higher is the risk of mortality and other complications. Okay. But we shouldn't forget as well that you can have as well inhalation, which means that during the burns process, there is a smoke product around that someone can inhale, and that can actually damage the lung. So the three things are very important. Okay. We're talking about degree, talking about the size of burns, and if there was inhalation of smoke product or not.
Okay. Now, to take us to the next segment, where we're going to be talking, causes. Just take us through the different types of patients. Just earlier you said, you have children who are there because of, burns from, hot water or fire, and adults. Just take us through.
Oh yes. What we shouldn't forget as well, children. You have accidental burns, but we can have as well abuse children. So you should be aware. That type of burns that we know, and then we can suspect that this an abuse case. But in terms of adult, most of the time you found it is flame burns. But another classification that we use, we said majority of patients are burned because of an accident. Okay, and then we do see less than 5% of adults, they try to commit suicide for some reason, and that you see it in a young female patient. Usually they are less than 30-year-old. Here in South Africa, but other places they are older. They've got some psychiatric problem that they try to commit suicide. Then, unfortunately, we have many patients here in South Africa, especially in Johannesburg, that we do admit. They are burned as a result of being assaulted. Yeah,
I think maybe this is a good point to break, because we need to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to pick up on that story about people being burnt as a result of assault. That after the break. Please stay with us.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 5:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Do you support the calls made by Blade Nzimande and Solly Mapaila?
It is not a call by Comrade Solly Mapaila and Comrade Blade Nzimande. It is the position of the party.
Yes.
And the position of the party, we support it unambiguously.
Why?
The theory of the revolution, in simple terms, was that revolutionary forces are going to take charge of the state. And having taken charge of the state, they are going to transform the state to eventually transform society.
Join me in Port Said live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
Sister Joyce Dlamini, who is in charge of adult burns units in Chris Hani Baragwanath, says a lot still needs to be done to create awareness about burns in South Africa.
We still need to go an extra mile and spread the gospel of prevent the burn, prevent the burn, prevent the burn, because it is happening on a daily basis. Initially, we used to have a burn as a seasonal condition, happening only in winter. But now it's happening right around the clock because of the informal settlement and all that.
While other burns are self-inflicted, some are pure accidents.
I work on greenhouses, so I was on top of greenhouse in the gutter scene. So where that greenhouse ends, there was a electricity wire, those supplies electricity. So it was like 3 meters apart. So those aluminium where I was put on top, it was 5 meters long, you see. So I was pulling and put on the gutter, pulling and put on the gutter. So one of it, when I was pulling, I just like forgot. Then it's fall inside the greenhouse. Then another side, it went up and touched the electricity cable. And while I was holding it with my hands, you see. So by that time I was shocked. And another guy was there on down. Then I was asking, what happened? Because, you know, I was shocked. So I wasn't know what is happening. So I was asking, what happened to me? What happened? So they tell me, it's electricity which that aluminum you touch is on the electricity cable, you see. So lucky enough, I just pray for that time. Just a short prayer. I just ask God, why to me now? Because I'm still young. I'm still wanna live a better life. You see, when I finished that prayer, I don't know what happened. I was just my hands. It was loosened on that. You see. So since then, I wasn't know what is happening to me. So when I asked them, they say that aluminum I was holding is cut on the medium. It was cut by itself. That's why I was like released on the electricity. So it's burned my hands a lot. It was too painful.
So it is critical to prevent burns. But before we can know how to prevent burns, we need to understand a little deeper the causes and the risk factors. And with me in studio helping me with that is Prof. Adeline Muganza, head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital. With him is Russell Meyering, communications officer from ER24. And we're joined by another special guest that I'd like to welcome to Health Talk, Loide Ndemwenda, who is a burn survivor from the Children of Fire organization. Welcome to Health Talk,
Thank
Moida.
you. Thank you.
I'm going to come back to you later, but perhaps let's start with you, Prof. I mean, you know, that talks to what we had just been talking about now in terms of the causes of you know, burns. You were saying, obviously, there's a group that is accidental, and there's a group where people were trying to commit suicide. Just take us through the one about violence, basically.
Yes, as Sister Dlamini said, we do see many patients now burning after being assaulted. So we used to be very quiet, let's say, in November, December, but nowadays we're always busy because of that. And what we've seen is we found male patient, they are burned by a girlfriend or wife. Usually they come with water burns. In that case, the intention is not to kill, the intention is to discipline or to do harm.
But, so the men are listening, obviously, that they still get burnt by boiling water.
Yes, yeah. But most of the time, when you see a female with that history, it's a flame. They use fire, and the intention is to kill. And
very interesting.
Absolutely. And sometimes male use chemical product on the face so that someone can be totally disfigured.
Yeah.
And they can't look at the lady anymore. So those are the intention.
Right. From ER24's perspective, I mean, what do you guys encounter out there, you know, that points to the causes? We mentioned earlier, obviously, the issue of violence. Just apart from accidental, we're going to come back to accidental, but the kind of violent ones as well. What do you encounter?
Absolutely. I agree with the Prof when he said violence, where we've seen it with the xenophobic attacks. We've seen it with various rioting, where people would use Molotov cocktails, necklacing, where setting tires alight and they're putting that over a person, and obviously that causes severe damage or death. And the chemicals as well. We had a spate some time ago where hijackers were holding cups of pool acid or some sort of acid. They would come to your window and knock. As soon as you open your window, they would throw this cup of acid in your face, and that can cause a severe disfigurement.
Very, very scary. All right, let's welcome a caller from Orange Farm. Caller, welcome to Health Talk. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a request or a question again. I was born at the age of 4 years. Right now, I'm going to turn 31. So I think, like, we are just ignoring people who are actually burned. Like, I do have scars, like they are really terrible and bad. So I don't know what to do because there are some effects that I'm facing right now. Like I do have a skin problem, and then when you go to the clinics, they don't have any knowledge about it.
All right.
What can I do?
All right. Thank you for that excellent question. Prof, I'd like you to keep that in mind because we'd like to talk about it when you talk about treatment. Yes. Here's somebody who has long-term burns and has scarring and would like to know what to do. So if you just keep listening, caller, we'll come back to you. But let me welcome Loida. Loida, you were burnt, obviously. Would you like to share your story with us?
Okay. I was burned intentionally in Wombath. It was a land grab. I got burned intentionally with 17 children, and 10 of them died, including my young sister. Sure. And from there, I actually didn't know myself because I thought it was the end of the world.
When was that, Lloyd?
It was in 2010, the 13th of July, first year of my high school. Yes.
And how were you burnt? Fire?
It was set, it's a long story. It was set on purpose. When you burn the grass every year for it to grow again, and then that day it just happened that it was a call for the death of many innocent children because of the land and corruption in our country.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you then when you were burnt?
I was 13.
13?
Yes.
And how did that impact you?
I must say, when I was still in hospital, I was not facing the world. I was just in hospital. And when I came out, there's lots of discrimination. Like when I came to Chorongofa in Johannesburg at the end of 2011, they made me find myself, my inner space, that I'm a strong woman, a leader who's going to try to fight for other children. Hence, I did not get justice. So I enjoyed the fact that they brought a student lawyer from France to come and help me investigate this whole matter. That's when I started not minding everyone who's looking at me, everyone who's teasing me or any other burnt children. And from there, I think I am just who I am inside. They must judge burn survivors from inside, not the outside, because what burnt is the skin and not the soul or the attitude.
Very, very, very profound. I'm going to come back to you now, Sihle, Loida, but let's take Sihle on the line in Gauteng. Sihle, welcome to Health Talk.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you, Sihle?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'd like to give a great thanks to Bara Chrysalis Ben's unit. It did a marvelous, tremendous job to my son. Thanks, Prof. Muganza. This is Siatemba's mom. He's healing okay. Thank you very much for whatever you have done. Thank you. All the support, everything. People should not run away from Bara. It's a good hospital. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sihle. Well, a thumbs up from a happy parent.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So let's get back to you then, Loida. So what do you do now, today? You say that you're from Children of Fire. What work do you do now?
Children of Fire, they've been helping me a lot. They help me in many ways. They help all the burn survivors psychologically, and they don't just help us to get proper medical care.
Yeah.
They help us to grow strong and find a way to go forward, because many of us are afraid of other people. What will people say if they see me on the street? But we climb Mount Kilimanjaros and go overseas, especially if the doctors in South Africa are failing or won't help us at all, because we demand what we want. And what I'm doing right now is that I found out that I want to study PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics.
Yeah.
Now, for me to learn it and get to university, I need to teach us first. So I'm currently teaching the children, the burnt children and the blind kids, to learn how to think for themselves and never mind the world, because a person will always be a person and they will always judge. And I want them to think, I want South Africa to consider philosophy as a subject from grade 7 maybe, for us to know our way forward.
But the important thing is that you've received help from the fact that you had these injuries from the burns,
Yes.
and you've come to accept it, and that they don't define who you are, basically.
Yes.
Very interesting. Just over the last few seconds of the segment, I guess it's important to go back to those accidental burns that are usually common around this time. Just let's go to those common things around a household that lead to burns accidentally.
Absolutely. Well, one of the first things that the nurses said was prevention. So prevention. Make sure that all your electrical appliances are safe to use. Make sure that there aren't any chemicals around where children can reach them for your accidental burn injuries. Your fireplaces should have a safety guard around them. As I said, your lights, which generally when we've responded to houses that have burned, it's your lights and your plugs that have
So those are common things, the electrical burns.
Absolutely.
And accidental burns from boiling water and the stoves and so on. What about, it's cold now. People make fires to keep themselves warm.
Yes, absolutely. We always say that burns it's as well the disease of poverty. Why are we saying that? Because the more you improve the lifestyle of people, you'll have less burns. That's what we see in other countries, like in Europe and set.
All right, let's just keep it there because we'd like to continue this discussion afterwards.
Yes.
We need to go for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we now continue the story of prevention of burns. Please stay with us.
The Law Society has slammed notices sent to 4 universities to jack up standards or risk losing their LLB courses. The Council on Higher Education issued a stern warning to the universities to conform within 6 months.
I think it will affect the university. I think outside the law faculty, there's a funding issue.
It's been 112 years since Enoch Sontonga died as a relatively unknown composer, choir master and teacher. But today his legacy lives on through his greatest composition, Nkosi Sikeleli Afrika.
For all your news updates, stay tuned to Your World from Monday to Sunday. Rights and Recourse tackles constitutional issues.
When South Africa became a constitutional democracy, we had a fairly sound legal system in place requiring the Constitution to guide the direction in which it must go and the way in which it must be refashioned.
The Justice Ministry, the custodian of human rights.
We actually have a plan to come up with a comprehensive review of our human rights instruments.
Advocates dealing with evidence.
Sometimes you have to use a crook to catch a crook. So we expected that the credibility would really be taken to task. You try and consult your witnesses and prepare them as best as you can.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Matez on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
According to Sister Deborah Churu, unit manager for the pediatric burns unit, children heal quicker than adults.
They get out of bed quickly, unlike the adult patients. And they are just nice to nurse. They are always happy. If a patient, a kid is having pains, it's the truth. So you give analgesics and then we go on with our work.
There are many reasons behind children's burns.
They are from a poor socio-economic background. And we have small houses which are shacks, and then everything is done around there. It's a kitchen, sitting room, and a bedroom. So we work around that place, and it's too small. And the kids, you know that they are very fast. So you turn your back, you find the kids bent.
This was the case with 3-year-old Joyce Buckley.
It was on the 7th of April of last month. It was 5:30. The incident happened. Yeah, she burned to the kettle of boiling water. Yeah, she actually pulled the plug, so I didn't actually know what to do. So then I ran to the sink and I just wet her with the cold water. And it was like in a shock actually, because the last time I saw she was sleeping. She and her brother went into the bedroom to go fetch a dish in my clothes. Then the next thing I heard, she was just screaming. Yeah, and found the ambulance around 5:45 until 8:30. The ambulance came. Transfers now take us now to Vosloorus Hospital. From Vosloorus, then they transfer us now here to Baragwanath. And since that very same on the 7th of April, then she was admitted here by Baragwanath Hospital. Yeah, and now then she got discharged like last week Thursday.
Okay, welcome back. We're talking burns, and with me in the studio is Prof. Adeline Muganza, head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, and with him also Russell Meiring, communications officer from ER24. And we're now joined by another special guest, Bronwyn Jones. Bronwyn is the founder of an organization called Children of Fire. Welcome to Health Talk, Bronwyn.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to hear about the wonderful things that your organization does. We had a glimpse of it, from Lloyd that we had earlier on. But in this segment, I'd like us to just focus on prevention of burns. Now, tell us a bit about what your organization does in terms of prevention.
In terms of prevention, we work with the poorest sector of the community, mostly squatter camps. There's at least 4 million South Africans still living in squatter camps. And we have done a variety of initiatives. We put people through first aid training with St. John Ambulance. We put people through firefighting and fire prevention courses with our local fire brigade. And we also go to schools and put on safety plays where, for example, the children will learn how to run at another child with a blanket and wrap it around them to stop, drop and roll. We produce posters that we send around the country, and safety videos. We've sent safety videos to all the main fire brigades with the simple message, so that if someone's clothing does catch a light, people will get them to the ground and extinguish the flames.
Okay.
In addition to that, we talk to schools and communities, old folks' homes and so on, about the different devices that people use to keep warm during winter, and safer alternatives.
Talk about devices. I mean, you've got some 2 devices here that you brought here. Do you want to just take us through
Sure.
what these are? Yeah.
This is a cardboard model of a common Taiwanese or Chinese-made paraffin stove. When we met with Heinz Roeder years and years ago at the Red Cross Children's Hospital, he said when these stoves came into the country, that was when the burns injuries soared. And really, if people were not using liquid paraffin day to day, the injuries would be much less. There was legislation brought in to try and make the stove safer, but this style of stove is around a lot. We have a cardboard model because when we're play acting, we don't really want to throw a real stove at someone else. One of the replacements that exists was something called Parasafe. It was designed by the late Colin Vale and also George Long. And this was a much better design. You still would rather not have paraffin in the home at all, but it had 3 feet, and when even 1 foot was lifted off the table, the flame would extinguish, and you could not refill it when it was alight. But that doesn't stop people misusing things, and people using stoves as heaters is a major problem, and people using them as weapons to throw at each other.
Okay. All right, very interesting. I'm going to ask you, Russell, to obviously go over the first aid part, because I think it's important for people to know what to do and what not to do when faced with minor burns at home. But I'm going to come back to you, Prof. In terms of your prevention in generally, based on what you see, what's your message?
Yeah, I think my colleagues here said, prevention starts from the scene as well. So you prevent burns to happen, and you prevent mortality to happen. So to prevent burns to happen, you need to do all things that have been said here. And I remember that when I was the president of the South African Burn Society, we took this matter to the government, and the government played a role. So they brought some regulations, and we used to see 25% of our admission due to primary stove explosion, we call it. And today we see less than 1%. So something was done together between the South African Burn Society and the government. But the prevention of mortality, it means that someone has got burn, then you have to treat it and prevent all other complications.
Okay, that's where you come in, Russell. What should people do and what people shouldn't do? What is it that people shouldn't do, of course, when they face with burns?
There are currently so many myths, and I'm sure the professor has heard of them all as well, where we've heard of the old wives' tale, where using toothpaste on burns. Right. I've heard of petrol, eggs, onions, zambak, Vaseline, all of these things, which is obviously a big no-no. One of the first things we need to do, if the patient is on fire, promptly put them out, and we need to cool the burning process. All right, so that skin has reached a very high temperature while burning, so we need to cool it, not with ice or anything like that, a normal cool running water, and not for too long, just to drop the temperature a bit from there. And as the professor said earlier, the skin is a barrier for your external diseases and things like that. So now that the skin is gone, we need to create another barrier. So there are quite a large amount of burn dressings out there which one can purchase and use. So once we have cooled the burn area, we place a burn dressing. If we don't have a burn dressing, you can use a wet bandage, or a moist bandage, I should say rather. Place that over the dressing and immediately get off to definitive care. So get to Barrack Hospital, get to a nearby facility where you can get that treated immediately.
Prof, is there anything like a minor burn that does not require any medical attention?
No, I will avoid to say that, because if you get burn, always get attention by a doctor or a GP. And then Russell is there. They will come and they will advise you as well that this major burns needs to go to the hospital. Of course, we're not going to treat everyone in hospital. Some patient can be treated as an outpatient. Right. In fact, many patients will be treated as outpatient. It's only 10% of those patients would be admitted because of the severity of burns, or because of the area where burn is involved.
Okay. I've just had a question from our production team to say, what if somebody is in the kitchen busy with cooking and, the stove element just, burns a part of the hand or a finger, and can't you just cool it down and, carry on with life?
That's the problem with burns as well, is so you've damaged the skin, there could be infection. Right. So you, as the professor said, you do need to get it checked out. Rather cool it with cold running water, apply your burn dressing or your burn shield, bandage it, and even a pop to a doctor at a pharmacist, and just get them to check it out.
Just to make sure.
Yeah, rather err on the side of caution with things like this.
Okay, all right. So you mentioned earlier, Bronwyn, that you obviously go out to communities and so on. Just how widespread is the organization? Which communities do you essentially go to?
The one we've been working at longest is the Joe Slovo squatter camp. It's on the edge of Coronation and Crosby, and that's where we've pioneered most of our work. That community is unfortunately in the midst of forced removals, so it's a distressed state. But we've actually worked across the continent of Africa, and we've assisted with burns outreach into hospitals in Congo and children from war zones. And we've also sent children out of this country to Kenya, to Tunisia, and to Europe and America for surgery when we can't get it here. So it's very widespread.
Okay. Right, time for another quick commercial break. When we come back, we now focus on treatment for burns. Please stay with us.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News Live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant, a life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Multiple League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
President Jacob Zuma says that the country's security agencies will seek new and more effective ways to fight crime.
Crime, as you would appreciate, depends on the circumstances. This narrative that South Africans are xenophobic, we don't necessarily agree with it.
This group of Bangladeshi shop owners ooze frustration. They've lost everything.
I'm like totally destroyed. I can't see what I'll do, where I'll go.
Rescue workers are still searching for the body of a 5-year-old boy who fell into an old mine shaft near Boksburg in Ekurhuleni.
Tensions remain high with thousands of community members refusing to clear the scene until the boy is found.
Auckland Park-based Children of Fire charity has helped many children with surgery and rehabilitation, demonstrating that there is life after burns.
My name is Harmony Kumete and I'm from Tembisa. I was burnt when I was 7 years old in a shack. And then I went to Tembisa Hospital and I came to Children of Fire in 2015 and I had my surgery. I did my surgeries here.
Have you healed completely?
I'm healing and I'm getting much better. Yes.
And do you go to school?
Yes, in Pega. It's where the school, yeah. And I do grade 6.
My name is Franklin Muchadibane. I got burnt when I was 12 years old. I was gonna put water to go to school, but the gel exploded. You know, the ethanol gel that they used to use before, that they put inside the 2-plate stove. So because of the heat of yesterday, it expanded. When I went to it exploded. Then it got to my body. Then it burned me. So then I went to Dobsonville Hospital. Then I was transferred to Baragwanath Hospital. After that's where I spent the whole year there, then recovered.
How do you find your stay here at
Children of Fire, has it helped you in any way?
It has helped me in a lot of ways because of like, you know, when you're alone, like people can like say things and stuff, people who think they're normal. But when you're in a group, like if people start saying stuff, you can also say stuff at them back because of like you look normal. You don't have to be like, you don't have to be like them to be normal. We are normal, even though you are bent, you are still normal, still functional.
Welcome back. Now, we're going to learn a little more about treatment of burns. I have 3 special guests with me in the studio. Prof. Adeline Muganza, head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital. Of course, we have Russell Meyring, communications officer from ER24, and Bronwyn Jones, founder of Children of Fire. Now, perhaps let's start with you, Prof. When you talk treatment, clearly, it's a multidisciplinary team that treats burns. Yes. We're talking here about somebody that requires hospitalization. Yes. Just take us through that.
Absolutely. The treatment of burns is to restore first the integrity of the skin, which means you must do everything to cover the wound and to prevent that wound of having other complications. And the treatment as well include prevention of all complications, and many complications, those early complications and late complications that you can see. People living at Brownwine, you can see they've got psychological problem, they've got the contractures, stiffness of the joint, and they've got other skin problems. Yeah. Those are late complications. But what we do immediately when someone comes is to prevent that the burn victim doesn't lose too much water in the body, because you lose too much water, it can end up with some kidney failure. And the most important is to prevent the infection that we can discuss later maybe.
All right. Let's go back to that earlier call. Remember we had a caller who asked a question to say she got burnt a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And now has scarring, clearly, you know, has disfigurement, and should like something done about it. Yes. But she can't get help because when she goes to clinics, nothing is done.
Yes, absolutely. I think that person is right. Those are the late complications that we've seen. You've seen some of the patients in the pictures here. And then that's why we said burns is a multidisciplinary approach. And those patients with stiffness of the joint, or they've got some contractures, they can't move the neck, they must see the plastic surgeons. But for that particular patient, I'll advise the patient to come and see me early next week. Okay. And then I can direct that patient to the plastic surgeons for reconstruction.
Wonderful. I believe we have some tweets that came through. Perhaps you can go through some of them quickly, if they can just come up on my screen next to me here. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to come back to you later and ask you, Bronwyn, about the... all right, the first one says, it's Woodlaw KC, the car's on fire. Tips for reacting and responding to a vehicle fire. Very pertinent question. And Mary Catherine says, heartbreaking. Elderly men and women being treated in hospital after suffering injuries in a fire on Berrydown. Robin says, I microwaved my mashed potatoes a little too much, and I took one bite, and Def just got 2nd-degree burns inside my mouth. Definitely got... Austin says, 2nd-degree burns are no fun. And Tamiri says, gel derived from wood can now be used for fast healing of burn injuries. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to ask you to respond to some of those, because very interesting. Some of the, for instance, gel from the wood.
Yes, that can create actually severe burns. And what people are not talking here as well is chemical burns.
Yeah.
You know, we do see many chemical burns recently. And that can actually create a deep burn, and with other complications, as we can see, changing of the skin, stiffness of the skin, and so on.
Yeah. Bronwyn, the work that you do in supporting, you know, people with long-term burns, we've had a glimpse of it. You know, do you want to just expand on it a bit?
Yeah. The problem for some of the children that come to us, or even adults, is they come very long after the initial burn. So people may have been close to a hospital and got good treatment early on, say for a child who pulled a pot down and they got a burned arm, but then they didn't go back for occupational therapy or physio, and gradually the arm became more and more and more bent, and the veins and arteries migrate, and then it becomes really difficult to try and get them a straight arm again. So the ones we're helping mostly are ones who have not followed through with the treatment. And a big problem is a shortage of plastic surgeons in South Africa now, particularly hand surgeons. And some of the ones, particularly the foreign ones, being discouraged from carrying on working here or being made to leave. We lost Nabil Lawal, a Tunisian surgeon.
It's a long-term problem that we're going to have to talk about some other time. Unfortunately, we're out of time a little bit. Just your last word in 30 seconds, what people at home should do to try and avoid getting injured through burns.
Well, as we said so many times before, prevention is better than cure. I believe every home should have a fire extinguisher. And if you can't afford a fire extinguisher, as they are relatively inexpensive, a bucket of sand or two, as well as a bucket of water. Safe-proof your home, so if there's a faulty plug or light, fix it, or get a specialist in to fix it. Make sure that when you are using, as people said, the pots of hot water or the stove, make sure that your kids aren't in the kitchen, leave the handles away from the edge of the counter so they can't pull it over, and just be safe.
We couldn't have overemphasized on this any more than this, because I mean that's the word that we should be spreading. Prevention, prevention, prevention. Well, gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much for your time. Prof. Adeline Muganza, head of the burns unit at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, and Russell Mayring, communications officer ER24, and Bronwyn Jones, founder of Children of Fire. Thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. Okay, folks, well, that's it. That's where we're going to have to leave it for today. See you again next week, same time on SABC2. And remember that if you've missed any of our shows, you can catch them on the YouTube channel. I'm Dr. Sello Mataung. Please do take care. And yes, thank you so much for your calls and the tweets. Take care.